According to the director of Auckland Writing Centre, The Creative Hub, John Cranner, everyone has their own distinctive voice as a writer. To help them find it, the centre employs guest speakers like Tessa Duda, Owen Marshall and Paula Morris. On offer are beginners creative writing courses, fiction courses, advanced fiction courses and even travel writing. Julie Hill went to visit one of their classes.
I thought it was a really good read, and not being a young adult writer or reader myself, I sort of hadn't tuned into the difficulty level, but for me anyway, I like the complications. So.
At the Creative Hub's advanced fiction class, the group of mid-career writers are giving feedback to Jeannie McLean, who's writing her third crime novel for young adults.
It's a YA crime story based on a young girl who is brought over to New Zealand from Australia by her mother, and she thinks she's just coming because she's been naughty. Her mother doesn't want to leave her at home alone or with anybody, and she gets here and her mother disappears, and she discovers gradually that her mother isn't who she has thought. The whole story that her mother has told her starts to unravel, and it's not true, what she thinks for the last 15 years. So.
I really like the bit where it says the chair was hard and the light too bright and etc., and wanted to lie down, go back to bed.
I've had 2 novels published, short novels for young adults, and they both sort of have an element of crime, mystery about them. Yeah, and somebody always dies.
And for those novels, have you been in this situation where you've been able to discuss your work with other writers who are at a similar level to you?
This is new to me, a group like this, but I did have a mentor, a fellow writer who was very truthful and very blunt, and with both my other manuscripts, and I found that really helpful, and that's I've been writing this one now for about 3 or 4 years and plodding along fairly erratically, and when I saw this opportunity to come up to a group at this level, that's what attracted me.
And I could really relate to her when she talked about wondering whether the toilet was connected or not, because I was hoping that as well.
I'm probably like a lot of writers in that I feel a bit tense about showing my work to other people.
That's quite ironic, isn't it? Because surely it's intended for a lot of people to read.
That's true, but once it's in print, it's done. But while you're writing it, I still feel a bit vulnerable about showing it to people. So it did take a bit. But the group, well, I think they're very honest and very straightforward about it, and they pick up inconsistencies and general things like that. But they're also extremely supportive, and everyone's in the same boat.
I think there's some really good tension, and I've written down some specific comments in your manuscript. So, well done.
Do you take everyone's comments on board, or do you sort of pick and choose which ones you're going to apply?
I only pick the good ones. No, I do. I usually, probably in a couple of days' time, I will read through the notes that I've taken and the notes that they've written, and I'll go back to the manuscript on the screen, and then I will decide which aspects I think work, because different people sometimes will have a different opinion. They'll think, oh, I really like this, but somebody else will say, well, I didn't like that.
I mean, some people were quite specific, weren't they? They didn't like the sound of a particular word or somebody's name or something like that.
And I find that really useful, because especially with this part, I've struggled a bit writing these, this section, and this is probably the 3rd draft, but I know that something isn't working quite well, but it's useful to hear what other people think about that, and they write copious notes on the script, which is really useful, and a lot of what they've said I've incorporated in some way.
I quite liked how you almost mirrored Ian and Greta. Like, Ian's supposed to be this adult, but there was all this subtle stuff all the way through where you could just see him just like a teenage friend, rolling his eyes, stomping around, throwing his toys instead of...
A lot of the writing I've done, I've tended to... I don't show it to my family necessarily.
Really? Do you think it's harder to show it to your friends and your family?
I don't show it to my family. In a way, I think it's not fair to put them in the position where if they didn't like it, because they're hopefully emotionally involved with me, therefore they wouldn't want to hurt my feelings. And that's a bit useless, really, because it doesn't help me as a writer for someone just to say, gosh, that's nice.
The fingernails digging into the wrist so hard, I expected to feel blood dripping from the puncture wounds. I thought that was a little bit too much. But then the other bits work really, really well. I really like her tone, that kind of sassy kind of inner monologue that she usually has going. That's quite
Creative Hub Director John Cranner.
We have the system, we call it the CRC system, which is taken from Toastmasters, which is 2 parts positive feedback to 1 part constructive criticism, and that seems to work as a good balance, because if you're feeling a little bit wounded after the so-called constructive feedback, you're then buoyed up by the subsequent positive remarks, and people learn very fast that way.
There's quite often talk about the creative writing schools across New Zealand, attached to universities especially, that Bill Manhire, people sound one way and the Himaira students sound in another way.
It's all true.
Can you recognise that kind of stamp on the writer?
Yeah, I think there is a slight risk of that, and that's one of the reasons why we're very, very deliberately quite eclectic here. Although I'm the overall coordinator, and I love that role of bringing a group of people together in a supportive environment so they can have fun and learn new skills. It's a real passion of mine for modern writing. But I deliberately bring in as wide a variety as possible of leading New Zealand fiction authors, in order that my stamp is not too heavily upon my graduates, because I think it's really healthy. What we try to do here is we try to allow each writer in the group to discover during the course of the year his or her own authentic literary voice.
So what is that exactly, or what isn't that? I mean, what would you be doing if you were not writing in your own voice?
Well, you'd be imitating some other author, which is inauthentic and won't get you published ultimately, and certainly won't give you a career as a writer. Everyone has their own distinctive voice, literary voice, if they're given the right support and enough stimulation and access to sufficient variety of technique and craft, will eventually blossom forth with their own voice. And it's great when it happens. It's what makes this job worth doing.
Jenny was saying before that Roger Hall spoke to this group about dialogue.
That's right. So we have a number of top New Zealand writers come in and do specific workshops on particular areas. So we had Roger come in 2 weeks ago and do a wonderful workshop on dialogue writing, of which he is probably one of the best practitioners in New Zealand. We had Tina Shaw, who's published 7 novels. She came in last week and did a lovely workshop on character. We have Sarah Lang, who's the Buddle Finlay Sargison Fellow this year. She's a new young writer, and she's coming in to do a workshop on description next week. So we're actually got 8 top writers coming in to do these specific workshops, which is a lot of fun, and it means we reap the skills of top New Zealand writers,
To what extent are you already thinking at this point about the marketing aspects of your book? The demograph, and if a certain subject is hot at the moment, or that kind of thing?
We talk a bit about the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. Someone once said, I think, those who are married to the zeitgeist will rapidly become widowers. So you can't be too slavishly a follower of fashion, but it is actually quite healthy to attune yourself to the kind of cultural currents. We're quite attuned to political and social and cultural events as well. We're not kind of hiding in our garrets. One of the reasons why I moved outside the university and set up this hub was to get a little bit more of ordinary social life and the real kind of gritty culture of New Zealand into the culture of the centre. There's a slight risk in university creative writing schools of becoming a little too rarefied and academic, and that's not where we're at. We're quite down to earth here.
And they're all women but one in this class.
We have a couple of men, but one's away. Yeah, generally women do tend to be in the majority in these classes. The ratio is usually around about 1/3 men and two-thirds women.
Does that reflect writers in general in fiction in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think it does. It also reflects the fact that women seem to be more interested in reading fiction. It's as simple as that.
And cleaner and generally better.
Unquestionably superior.
I love how she wanted to cocoon herself in the duvet and shut out the world. I remember something very similar at that age, and I didn't want to go to school. I just wanted the duvet to wrap around me and waft me away somewhere. So it's really struck a chord. And I like the smooth, easy flow to the story. I think the YAs will appreciate that too. There's no difficult ambiguity about the writing, so keep it up.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tui. Round of applause.
Katie Henderson has already won a number of National Short Story Awards and is now developing a collection of short stories that might become a novel.
It's quite a big transition for me because I like the compact form, and it's trying to find a lot more words for the page, I think.
So why did you decide that you wanted to go longer form?
Just being with the people in the group, really, and seeing that they were having success with it, and I was, really intrigued by the whole process of writing a novel, which is quite different to short story writing, I think.
So what's your work? Tell me about it.
I'm only beginning compared to a lot of the other people who already have drafts. I'd say only a couple of chapters so far.
So at this point, do you know what's going to happen towards the end?
I have no idea.
Really?
I tend to write heuristically. It sort of happens as it happens.
And what about giving advice to other people? Do you find that easy?
In this group I do, because we've become friends. I'm not really that audacious enough to give advice to people outside the group, I don't think. But yeah, it's a really lovely group and we're all very supportive, and so as time's gone on, I felt much more easy about giving advice, more confident about it.
And so what do you do with the comments?
I generally get things written on my manuscript and I go home and look at all the comments, and I will sometimes change things according to them, but mainly I just sort of keep it in my head, I think, because I'm at such an early stage. Some of the comments, I think, well, they only see fragments of what I'm doing, so they can't really make comments about structure or anything yet.
And you've got 8 people here giving you comments. Is it sometimes a little bit of a whirlwind of feedback?
Yeah, it is. On the night it's, quite heady and you don't really take it all in, so getting home and having a look at what they've written is really helpful.
And how do you find all the criticism from everybody else in the class? Is it easy to take?
Yeah, I think everybody's very supportive, of course, and it's I just like being in this stimulating environment because, writing's quite an isolated sort of profession. Yeah, I just wanted to get along and have a sense of community, really, be with like-minded people.
Julie Hill reporting on the Creative Hub, which has just moved to the waterfront rooms at the Auckland Maritime Museum. The fiction and travel writing courses begin on the 6th and 7th of September respectively, and next year the centre is going to be offering screenwriting and writing for children courses.